Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! After finishing my culinary arts degree, I had dreams of opening my own cafe. But the economy took a nosedive, and I found myself struggling to make ends meet. That's when I landed this job at a popular local restaurant. It wasn't exactly what I had in mind, but I was grateful for the steady paycheck and the chance to hone my coffee making skills. Things were going pretty well until our new chef arrived. From day one, it was clear he was going to be trouble. This guy in his late 40s swaggered into the kitchen like he owned the place, bragging about his time as a private chef on some fancy yacht. He treated the front of the house staff and kitchen porters like dirt beneath his shoes. But what really got under my skin was how he behaved around the younger female staff. Any girl between 16 and 20 became his target. At first, it was just creepy comments and leering looks. But soon, he started cornering them in the kitchen, trying to flirt and making them visibly uncomfortable. I couldn't stand by and watch this happen. I went to the management, along with a few other concerned co-workers. But they brushed us off. They seemed more concerned about the chef's reputation than the safety and comfort of our young staff members. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I knew I couldn't confront him directly without risking my job. So I came up with a more subtle form of revenge. Coffee was my domain, and I was going to use it to make his 12-hour shifts miserable. I started by switching out his regular coffee for decaf. I let the other baristas in on my plan, and they were more than happy to help. This guy would down 4 cups of coffee during his shift and still be yawning like he hadn't slept in days. I say, "Hey, chef needs another coffee. Make sure it's decaf." Co-worker, "Got it. He's been extra grumpy today. Think it's working?" "Oh, it's definitely working. Look at him dragging his feet around the kitchen." After a couple of months of this, I decided to shake things up. I switched him to coffee with extra caffeine and watched him zoom around the kitchen like a maniac. Then, just as suddenly, I put him back on decaf. Those withdrawal symptoms were a sight to behold. Karen, one of the young waitresses, "Is it just me, or is a chef acting weirder than usual?" "How so?" "One minute he's bouncing off the walls, the next he looks like he's about to pass out, and he's got these killer headaches." "Huh, that's strange. Maybe he's coming down with something." I knew exactly what was causing his mood swings and headaches, but I wasn't about to let on. Every time I saw him rubbing his temples or snapping at someone because of his caffeine-induced irritability, I felt a little surge of satisfaction. One day, things came to a head when the chef exploded at one of the kitchen porters over a minor mistake. "You incompetent fool! Can't you do anything right? I swear, working with people like you is like being surrounded by monkeys." "I'm sorry, chef. It won't happen again." "It better not, or you'll be looking for a new job." I watched this exchange from the coffee station, my blood boiling. But instead of intervening, I simply prepared his next cup of coffee. Decaf, of course, with a smile on my face. "Here is your coffee, chef. Extra strong, just how you like it." "About time. I need something to keep me awake around these idiots." As the weeks went by, the chef's behavior became increasingly erratic. His mood swings were legendary, and his cooking started to suffer. The restaurant owner finally took notice when customers began complaining about the food quality. The owner says, "What's going on in my kitchen? The reviews are tanking, and I've got customers sending back dishes left and right." The chef answers, "I don't know what's wrong with me lately. I can't focus, and I'm always tired, and these headaches are killing me." "Well, figure it out fast, or we'll have to make some changes around here." I felt a little bit guilty as I overheard this conversation, but then I remembered all the young girls he had made uncomfortable, all the staff he had belittled and abused. My resolve strengthened. The final straw came when the chef made a particularly crude comment to one of the youngest waitresses, right in front of a table of customers. The diners were appalled, and the girl burst into tears. The customer says, "Excuse me, but that is completely unacceptable behavior. We'd like to speak to the manager immediately." The owner was called, and this time he couldn't ignore the situation. I watched as he pulled a chef aside for a heated discussion. Minutes later, the chef stormed out of the restaurant shouting obscenities. Then the owner says, "Attention everyone. As of today, our chef will no longer be working here. We don't tolerate harassment or unprofessional behavior in this establishment." There was a collective sigh of relief from the staff. Had I gone too far? Maybe. But seeing the genuine smiles on my coworkers' faces made me think it was totally worth it. I never thought I'd end up in a courtroom defending myself against a lawsuit for $1 million. Let me tell you how I got into this mess. I've always been a pretty easygoing guy, moved into this quiet suburban neighborhood about 5 years ago with my wife. We're both in our mid-30s, no kids yet, just enjoying life and each other's company. I work from home and my wife's a teacher at the local elementary school. Everything was great until about 6 months ago when we started noticing something odd. Our packages would go missing from the Porsche. At first, we thought it was just a mix-up with deliveries, but then it kept happening. We get notifications that our stuff had been delivered, but when we checked the Porsche, nothing. So we decided to set up a security camera, and boy, were we in for a surprise. We caught our next-door neighbor, this middle-aged woman with a bad dye job and a permanent scowl, sneaking into our Porsche and swiping our packages. Can you believe it? We tried talking to her about it. My wife and I went over to her house, knocked on the door, and tried to have a civil conversation. "Hi there, we're your neighbors from next door. We've noticed some of our packages have gone missing, and we were wondering if you might have seen anything." "I don't know what you're talking about. I mind my own business. Unlike some people." "We have video footage of someone taking our packages. We just want them back. No questions asked." "Are you accusing me of stealing? How dare you? Get off my property before I call the police." And she slammed the door in our faces. The nerve on that woman. We reported it to the police, but they said without catching her in the act, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested we try to catch her red-handed, so we decided to set up a little trap. Now, I'm not proud of what we did next, but we were at our wits' end. We'd lost hundreds of dollars worth of stuff, and this woman showed no signs of stopping. So we came up with a plan. We ordered an empty box and rigged it with a small air horn inside. The idea was that when she picked up a box, it would trigger the air horn and give her a good scare. We figured it might teach her a lesson and make her think twice about stealing again. The day came and we set our trap. We put the package on a Porsche and waited. Sure enough, not even an hour later, we saw her sneaking up to our house. She looked around, probably making sure no one was watching, and then made a grab for the box. Honk. The air horn went off, and she jumped back like she'd been electrocuted. But then something went wrong. She clutched her chest and collapsed right there on our Porsche. My wife and I rushed out. We hadn't meant for this to happen. We called an ambulance right away, and they came and took her to the hospital. Turns out she had a pre-existing heart condition, and our prank had triggered a mild heart attack. Now, don't get me wrong, we felt terrible. We never meant to cause her any real harm, we just wanted her to stop stealing our stuff. But she was okay in the end. The doctor said she'd make a full recovery. We thought that would be the end of it, maybe she'd learned her lesson, and we could all move on. But oh no, that wasn't enough for her. A week after she got out of the hospital, we got served with papers. She was suing us for $1 million. The lawsuit claimed we had intentionally caused her emotional distress and physical harm. Can you believe it? She was the one stealing from us, and now she wanted us to pay her a fortune because her crime didn't go as planned. So there we were, sitting in a courtroom listening to her lawyer spin his tale of how we were horrible neighbors who had tormented this poor, innocent woman. "Your Honor, my client has suffered immense physical and emotional trauma due to the malicious actions of the defendants. They deliberately set a trap designed to cause fear and distress, knowing full well that my client has a heart condition." The judge asks, "And how exactly did your client come to be on the defendant's property when this incident occurred?" Well, Your Honor, my client was simply retrieving a misdelivered package. Objection, Your Honor. That's not true at all. Sustained. Please continue. As I was saying, my client was innocently on a property when she was subjected to this traumatic event. We are seeking damages of $1 million to compensate for her medical bills, emotional distress, and ongoing trauma. Our lawyer then got up to present our side of the story. He showed the judge the video footage of Karen stealing our packages multiple times. He explained how he had tried to resolve the issue peacefully, but Karen had refused to cooperate. Your Honor, my clients admit that their actions were misguided. However, they were driven to desperation by the repeated thefts committed by the plaintiff. They had no intention of causing physical harm and called for medical assistance immediately when they realized the plaintiff was in distress. The judge listened to both sides, looking increasingly annoyed as Karen's lawyer tried to paint her as a victim. Finally, he'd had enough. I've heard enough. This is one of the most ridiculous cases I've had the misfortune to preside over. Ma'am, you were caught red-handed committing multiple thefts. The defendant's response, while ill-advised, was a direct result of your criminal behavior. By Your Honor, they could have killed me. And you could have respected your neighbor's property rights. The fact that you have the audacity to sue after repeatedly breaking the law is astounding. Not only am I dismissing this case, but I'm also recommending that the district attorney's office look into prison charges against you for these thefts. You can't do this. I'm the victim here. Ma'am, the only victims here are your neighbors who had their property repeatedly stolen and are now being subjected to this frivolous lawsuit. Case dismissed. And just like that, it was over. Karen stormed out of the courtroom, red-faced and muttering under her breath. My wife and I couldn't believe it. We'd won. As we were leaving the courthouse, our lawyer pulled us aside. Look, you guys got lucky today. The judge saw through her act, but this could have gone very differently. In the future, if you have issues with a neighbor, please just call the police. No more DIY justice, okay? We nodded, feeling both relieved and a bit sheepish. We'd learned our lesson too. Sometimes trying to take matters into your own hands can backfire spectacularly. On the drive home, my wife and I talked about everything that had happened. We decided to install a security package box on our Porsche to prevent any future thefts. We also agreed that if we ever had issues with neighbors again, we'd stick to legal methods of resolving them. As for Karen, we didn't see much of her after that. Word got around the neighborhood about what had happened, and suddenly package thefts in the area dropped to zero. So that's my story, a simple prank gone wrong. A lawsuit that could have cost us everything, and a judge who saw through the lies. It's not how I expected to spend my year, but I guess it makes for a pretty good story of parties now. Just remember folks, respect your neighbors, don't steal, and if someone wrongs you, let the law handle it. It's a lot less stressful that way. I've been working at this factory for a few years now. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Started on the assembly line right after high school, figuring I'd save up some money before maybe going to college. But unfortunately, that was not the case. Anyway, this factory has a thing they call the Wall of Shame. It's supposed to be like the company directory, with photos of everyone who works here. But here's a kicker. They have a professional photographer come in to take these pictures. And wouldn't you know it? All the office folks are dressed up nice in their suits and dresses, while us factory workers are shown in our dirty work clothes. So, it's coming up on my 1-year anniversary at the plant, which means it's time for my picture. My supervisor tells me and my buddy, let's call him Jim, that we have to go to the photographer's studio after our night shift. Now, we work thirds, so that means dragging ourselves there at the crack of dawn when we're dead tired. I try to weasel out of it, but my supervisor is not having it. You two are going, and that's final. It's company policy. But we'll be exhausted after our shift. Can't we do it another time? No exceptions. You go right after your shift tomorrow, or there'll be consequences. That's when I get this idea. See, Jim and I, we like to grab a beer after work sometimes. So the day before our photo shoot, I tell him to bring a shirt and tie. Hey Jim, Bring a shirt and tie for tomorrow's photo. What? Why? Trust me, it'll drive the plant manager nuts. Jim grinning, I'm in. So the next morning, we show up at the studio looking sharp. The photographer's face is priceless. I thought I had 2 floor workers scheduled, not office staff. Oh, we're floor workers. We just wanted to look nice for our pictures. Is that not allowed? The photographer looks confused but takes our pictures anyway. We head home, feeling pretty smug about our little action of rebellion. About a month later, all hell broke loose. Jim and I get called into the plant manager's office. This guy's face is already red when we walk in. What's the meaning of this? He slaps our photos on a desk. Me, innocently. What seems to be the problem, sir? You know damn well what the problem is. Why are you dressed like this? Jim tells him, we just wanted to look nice for our pictures. They are professional photos after all. The manager sputtering, but you're floor workers. I'm sorry, sir. We didn't know it was against the rules for floor workers to dress up for their pictures. Is there a dress code we weren't informed about? I swear I thought the guy was going to pop a blood vessel. He turns this deep shade of purple and just points at the door. Get out. Just get out. Jim and I barely make it out of his office before we start cracking up. The look on his face was just something else. For the next few years, every time I walked past that wall of shame, I'd see our pictures. 2 guys in shirts and ties, surrounded by a sea of dirty work clothes. It was a small victory, but man, it felt good. The best part? It started a trend. The next year, a bunch of other floor workers showed up for their pictures in nice clothes. The plant manager tried to put a stop to it, but by then, word had gotten out about our little stunt. People were calling it discrimination if they forced only floor workers to wear work clothes in the photos. Eventually, they had to change the policy. Now everyone gets to choose what they wear for their picture. The wall of shame became just another boring company directory. But Jim and I, we know the truth. We know how it all started. The plant closed down a few years later, something about outsourcing and cost cutting. But I'll never forget the day we stuck it to the man. One necktie at a time. It might not have changed the world, but for a while there, it sure made coming to work a lot more fun. My wife and I have been married for 5 years, and we were finally starting to feel settled into our careers in our new home. She was a pediatric nurse and I worked in IT, and we've been saving up for a vacation to celebrate our anniversary. And that night, we were headed to dinner to finalize our plans. We were stopped at a red light when it happened. Out of nowhere, this huge SUV came barreling through the intersection and slammed right into the passenger side of our door. Everything after that is a blur of screeching tires, shattering glass, and the sickening crunch of metal. When I came to, I was dazed but mostly okay, but my wife, she was unconscious and bleeding. Paramedics had to use a jaws of life to get her out of the car. It was the scariest moment of my life. At the hospital, we learned the extent of her injuries. Multiple broken bones, internal bleeding, and a severe concussion. And the drunk driver who hit us, he walked away with barely a scratch. The next few months were a nightmare of surgeries, physical therapy, and mounting medical bills. My wife had to take an extended leave from work and I was struggling to balance my job with taking care of her. It felt like our whole life had turned upside down. And that's when we decided to seek legal help. Our lawyer advised us to wait until we had a full picture of my wife's recovery before filing a lawsuit. It took nearly 2 years, but we finally had all the documentation we needed. Medical reports, therapy reports, and even estimates for future procedures she might need. We filed a lawsuit against the drunk driver, but as our lawyer explained, it would mostly be handled by insurance companies. We thought that would be the end of our direct involvement with a guy who had caused us so much pain. But then one day I got a call from an unknown number. Hello? Is this a guy suing me? Who is this? Listen, I know you're the one suing me over that little fender bender. I think we need to talk. I was shocked. How did he get my number? And the little fender bender? Was he serious? I tell him, sir, I don't think we should be talking directly. This is being handled by our lawyers and insurance companies. Come on, man. Can't we just work this out? I made one little mistake. Now you're trying to ruin my life with this lawsuit? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This guy had nearly killed my wife, and he was acting like he was a victim. One little mistake? You were driving drunk. My wife almost died. Look, everyone makes mistakes. I've learned my lesson, but this lawsuit is going to bankrupt me. Can't you just drop it? Drop it? Do you have any idea what we've been through? The medical bills, the lost wages, the pain and suffering? Oh please, I'm sure you're just exaggerating to get more money. I bet your wife is fine now. And that's when I lost it. Fine? She had multiple surgeries. She still has metal plates in her bones. She might never be able to work as a nurse again. Well, that's not my problem. You should have better insurance if you can't handle a little accident. I was speechless. How could someone be so entitled and uncaring? This conversation is over. Don't contact me again. Our lawyers will handle everything from here on out. I hung up, my hands shaking with anger. I immediately called our lawyer and told him what happened. He assured me that the drunk driver's attempt to contact us directly would only strengthen our case. The lawsuit proceeded, and despite the drunk driver's attempts to minimize his responsibility, the evidence was overwhelming. The insurance company ended up settling for a substantial amount, covering all of my wife's medical expenses, lost wages, and future treatments. But the real satisfaction came when we learned that the drunk driver's license had been permanently revoked, and he was facing criminal charges for his actions. It turned out that this wasn't his first offense, and the judge wasn't feeling lenient. As for us, the settlement allowed my wife to focus on her recovery without financial stress. She eventually returned to nursing, though in a less physical demanding role. We finally took the anniversary trip we had been planning, grateful for each other and the second chance we've been given. Looking back, I'm still amazed at the entitlement of that drunk driver. He seemed to think that his mistake shouldn't have consequences, that our lives and suffering were less important than his convenience. But in the end, we got the closure we needed to move forward.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.